The Unlikely Innovators with Mike Commito and Steve Gravel. Presented by Cambrian R&D and the Center for Smart Mining.
Steve, I did it to you again. Another hockey podcast. You've indulged me once more, but it was more than just a hockey talk.
We it's talked about innovation, it's business, right?
Yeah, it was great. So we had Lee Elias on the show today, an award-winning author, professional speaker, and also multiple business owner. He's the founder and CEO of Hockey Wraparound and the Game 7 Group. And it's one of these podcasts where I discovered Hockey Wraparound like just by accident when I was kind of going through my own rollerblading COVID phase and, was looking for a way to preserve my sticks. And then, and I already knew about Lee because as I'd mentioned the show, I had been on his podcast, Our Kids Play Hockey. But like just the coalescence of these two things kind of coming together. I knew that he existed in that space with the hockey podcast, but didn't realize that the two businesses were the same. But yeah, just like a really passionate guy. You could tell from our conversation that you're about to listen to that everything that he does, like he puts like 100% of himself into.
For sure.
So, the one thing I would have loved to have seen, and I don't want to spoil it too much, is those early prototypes for the Hockey Wraparound. It's so great that they kept that because I think that's a really inspirational piece, especially if, you're talking to entrepreneurs, like what did this product start out as? How have we evolved it? Because you have to remember where you came from in order to really appreciate where you are now.
That's very sentimental, Mike, and I appreciate that. And I just want to remind everyone, if you're in the greater Sudbury area as summer starts, you can see a topless Mike Commito skating around, skating around the tennis courts on Cambrian College.
I always keep clothes on when I'm doing exercise outside. I'll save that for the outro.
I was gonna say it's pretty much like you're on the Venice Beach boardwalk, circa 1998. And folks are going by on their rollerblades. That's what it's like.
Yeah, I don't think anybody wants to see that around here. So,
I think we should probably save ourselves.
You got to save
this
intro now. Yeah, poor Lee. He's waiting to get to his interview, and this is how you start. So,
well, here he is.
Okay, so we're now back, and we're very pleased to be joined by Lee Elias. And Lee is an award-winning author, professional speaker, and has coached hockey at the international, professional, collegiate, and youth levels. He is the founder and CEO of Hockey Wraparound and Game 7 Group. In addition, Lee's professional experience includes having helped organizations such as the NHL, NBC, Hearst Media, A&E, Madison Square Garden, and several sports organizations. Lee is an acclaimed keynote speaker in both virtual and in-person events, and is a co-host of Our Kids Play Hockey, a top podcast in the hockey market that I was fortunate enough to be on. So Lee, you're actually our first guest on the podcast that I've been on their podcast, but I'll keep reading the bio that Lee is also an award-winning author of Think Like a Fan, Invest in Your Fans so they invest in you, win what every team needs to know to create a championship culture, and co-author of the Business Recovery Checklist, How to Thrive in the Aftermath of COVID-19, and Stay in Medicine, How Physicians Can Move Past Burnout and Regain Control. And then finally, Lee is passionate about his mission to make the world believe in trust and teamwork through his coaching, speaking, and consulting work. And now, of course, he is a guest on the Unlikely Innovators. Lee, welcome to our podcast.
Yeah, it's really exciting to be here, guys. I'm happy to be on. And Mike, as you said, it's like the trip around the sun, right? The return trip. No, I love that we can reconnect like this. We really enjoyed having you on Our Kids Play Hockey. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks. It's the ultimate crossover podcast. This is the first crossover podcast we've had, so this is great.
There you
Mike,
go.
For this podcast, I won't be upset that we talk about hockey.
Yeah, because it's baked into pretty much every question we have, so it's fair. I gave Steve
every question, every conversation, every action.
Yeah. Steve knows that I'm a huge hockey nut, so every episode there's always a way that I sneak it in, I guess I should say, but obviously it's very explicit this time around that it's going to be part of the conversation.
Well, Steve, I'll say this: it's my fault. It's me. I'm the problem. It's me. This is why this is happening today. But no, boys, it really is a pleasure to be here. I actually love what you do on this show, hockey aside, right? And I think we need more platforms and programs like this. So it really is great to be here.
Well, thanks. It's our pleasure to have you. And, on our podcast, we typically like to ask the guests, kind of not the what did you want to be when you grew up question, because that's a little too basic, but we do kind of derive it from that and kind of put a little bit of, mustard on it. But in your case, because we are talking about hockey, a lot of kids around the world dream of having a career in hockey, right? And oftentimes that's a career in playing hockey, but even a career in working in hockey is a dream for a lot of people. Can you maybe talk about your journey, from a player to working in the industry now as a coach and as a speaker, and how you're able to actually make that dream come true for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. Just as you were asking the question, I started thinking, when I was 12 or 13 years old, would this have been the path? And it's, like all the things you read in the intro, which I appreciate, by the way, but like even in the inventor side and the author side, those were not on my radar when I was a teenager, right? Those all came after. But, Mike, it comes back to a singular moment for me. I fell in love with the game pretty heavily, so around 12, 13 years old. That's actually when I started playing. I was a little late. But I really loved it. And I remember this moment happened where I was out playing street hockey. And I asked my friend, I said, "Hey, do you think we could ever make the NHL?" That was the question. And without hesitation, he just said, "No, there's no way. There's no way to make it." And I say this is an important moment because I remember a thought came into my head. It kind of changed my life. And that thought was, but someone's got to do it, right? Someone's got to be able to do it. And that put me on a path of just not being negative on myself and just no one makes it to, well, I'm going to try. Right. And, I was very blessed in hockey that I rose up the ranks pretty quickly. Got to play college hockey. I had a cup of coffee in the minors. Didn't make the NHL per se as a player. But just the path and the grit and the nose, head down drive to make something happen taught me so much about myself. And really it eventuated is after I graduated from college and somewhat playing at a really high competitive level, I realized I could apply that drive to anything. Right. And and then being involved in hockey wasn't limited to being a player. Now, look, you've both probably heard that saying that there's two deaths in every athlete's career or life. It's your actual death and when you stop playing. And to stop playing at that level was extremely hard. But I pursued writing. I pursued work with the NHL and in New York City, and I got that job. Right. So I always joke I did make the NHL eventually. And then, from that, I got into coaching. Right. I was coaching college in my early 20s. And so that dream was born from just that realization of, hey, someone's got to do it. The name of your show, the Unlikely Innovators, like that was an innovative moment for me where I'm so thankful and I have a lot of gratitude that my brain went that way because, I don't think a lot of teenagers think that way. I don't think we're taught that. The setting was right for me to think that thought. And I think all the success that I've had since then, in addition to being surrounded by great people, from my parents to my brother to my business partners, my wife, everybody has created this environment where I'm living my dream. I'm in hockey all the time. As you said, I own a hockey company. I've written books about it. I coach, and then it's expanded beyond hockey now to larger team building and assisting businesses and assisting other organizations to work together. So again, there's a long answer to a short question, but it really spawned from that moment.
And I think you couldn't have teed it up better, to be honest, about what we wanted to ask you next. Mike and I were talking in preparation for this, and it kind of dawned on me. And this is super obvious if you think about it, but the folks that support and work in these sort of adjacent hockey jobs far outnumber the folks that actually make it on the ice or on the bench. When you're looking at the training staff, the event day staff, and then everyone who works in hockey media, like you do, and around it. So I mean, you can have a long, fulfilling career in hockey without actually lacing up skates. Could you talk a bit about that, and like what advice you might have for the 12-year-olds out there that really are passionate about hockey and want to make it, but to know that there isn't, like, it's not just all or nothing when it comes to the hockey world.
Right.
There's so much more in there.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to identity and just how you identify as a person. And I'll tell you right now, till my mid-20s, I probably had the blinders on of I am a hockey player, right? Now, there were some benefits to that. I had a real singular focus, right? I was able to kind of compartmentalize in my brain that I better probably do good at this school thing if I want to keep playing, or my parents are not going to let me play. And yeah, I did enough to get by. I was probably a BC student through high school. And then when I got to college, I started really pulling in through great grades. But that's because the scenario was different. But the advice was this, is that I identified for far too long as just a hockey player. And when I started to realize that my identity is not limited to just playing the game, and that I choose to do that, I don't have to do that, that really opened my brain to a whole new world, in the sense of, as I said earlier, all of the determination, all of the effort, all of the drive that I put into the game I can apply that to anything. Right. And I remember that was the first time I thought I could write a book. I can get a master's. I can start a business. All of that sprung in my brain as soon as I realized that I am not just a hockey player. And I wish I had known to do that earlier. Right. And that's part of the message now when I talk, like you said, to the younger kids, is that you love this game and you should strive to do great in this game. And if you want to play at the top level, you should not give up on that dream. But your life is not limited to just that. And if you can do it, like this is that thought I keep telling myself, I tell this to my kids. If you can do it in hockey or whatever your passion is, you can do it when you're washing the dishes, which no one loves to do, or doing the laundry, which definitely nobody loves to do, I don't think, right? You can apply these things. And then what's cool from that, and when you look at all the things I do, you start to realize you could apply this 24/7 if you really want to. And now you're practicing it all the time and you're living in it. Right. And then that expands and evolves in itself. But that would be my advice, is just, if you're passionate about something, wonderful. That is fantastic. It's a gift to be passionate about anything. Not everybody gets that. Just know that your drive and passion into that is not limited to what you love.
That's actually the advice you had there is actually similar advice that Steve and I would have both received from one of our professors when we did our undergrad and our masters. And he's actually he's a hockey player himself, Mark Coolberg. He's a ref now. I think he probably refs more than he plays, but like his advice, his advice to me, like when I was kind of going through, undergrad and doing grad work, was like, market yourself as broadly as you can, because like I think we always thought that we were taking history. The only option for us was that route. Like you can only you study history, and what am I going to do with a history degree? I'm either going to be like a librarian going to library sciences, or I'm going to be a teacher. But he's like, you have all these skills that could be applied to a whole different range of businesses and sectors. You have communication skills, analytical skills, writing skills, all these things that like you at first you're like, oh, I never thought of it that way. And once he said that to me, at least like that kind of switched my brain on, because then like, I mean, the role that we're doing now here at Cambrian, like, it's not something I would have ever conceived of, something that I could have done, but it was him kind of saying that you have skills and you can market those skills in whatever you want to do. You just have to figure out what that is and go for it.
Yeah. And Michael, like, I'll take it a step further for you. I take a lot of pride in being a father and a husband. Right. And, I think, again, that letter to your younger self, even the 18-year-old me, if I went back in time and said, hey, you're going to be a dad, you're going to be a husband, you're going to be an inventor, a job creator, all these things that, an author, all these kind of cool titles, 18-year-old me would have been like, you failed. You didn't do the one thing that we wanted to do. And that's the point, right? Is I identified so strongly with what I needed, I'm using quotations, to become, that I was not able at that time to really be present. And I think it's important, as your professor did for you, just to open your mind of like, we don't know where things are going to go, right? Ever. So enjoy the journey you're on, try and be present with that journey. And again, everything I said before still stands. If you're passionate about something, you have a goal, a destination, stay passionate, but don't lock your entire existence into pass fail with that, because you don't know what it's going to become, right? Again, I'm a father and a husband first before all the other stuff. That is today the thing that I want to be the best at, right? And all the lessons I learned along the way go into that. So again, we're talking professions. I'm just taking it to a level higher. I think this is the type of person you become.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's paramount as well.
Well, one of the things we also wanted to ask you, like to kind of switch gears, was, we're going to talk about both your companies, but the first one I wanted to start with was Game 7 Group. And obviously, as as hockey fans that are listening to this as well, they understand the importance of a Game 7. I, as a Leaf fan, understand what Game 7 means, but I think for other people,
you'll never see
you
one.
do.
You'll never see one.
I mean, I see them. I just don't see, the outcome that I would like to see.
Right.
But
you've never felt the
year.
joy.
Yeah, I have not felt the joy. I felt a lot of nervousness, anxiety, and then sadness.
Yes.
But
I'm from Philadelphia. I understand completely, buddy. Don't worry.
Yeah. But beyond our respective teams and how they've done in Game 7s, Game 7s are obviously the pinnacle of any series. It's the best type of hockey is a Game 7. Game 7 overtime is obviously the highest you can get in terms of like just the excitement. But can you talk about that same type of high stakes mentality in a game 7 and how you apply that to your work, as a speaker, consultant, and with your businesses.
Yeah, thank you for bringing. Actually, I don't get asked a lot about the name of that one, so this is a great question. I named it Game 7 Group for a reason. One is, as you said, Game 7s are the most tense, the most sought after glory moments in sport. And I added group on there at the end because no one succeeds in those moments or fails in those moments alone. Mm-hmm. So the purpose of that group, in addition to kind of housing my professional work, is to create this mission that I'm on right now, which is to really reinvigorate teams. And I don't just mean in sports. I'm talking business, sports, and everything in between, families, right? I think as really as a world, but North America in general, we are straying away from an idealism of working together, which is really a human element, right? It's not a political element. It's not a American or Canadian element. It's a human element that we are built biologically to work together. And I'm on a mission to bring people back together so that they can understand, A, that we need each other, B, understanding the fundamentals of a great team, trust, accountability, communication, identity, and then how to nurture that group to succeed long-term and accomplish dreams, goals, whatever it is they want to accomplish. I think if we can do that more, Game 7 moments, right? Mm-hmm. We can understand the power behind teamwork and why we need to reinvigorate that into our society, into our sports teams, into our families. Because the only way forward is together. There is no way forward if we divide. I'm not going to quote Abraham Lincoln. We all know the quote. All right. So that is what Game 7 Group does. All of my work with that company is driven to bring teams together, make them excel, whether that's getting maximum performance for better revenue or maximum performance to win a Game 7, literally. That's the purpose of that group. And I love every second I get to work with people and with projects in that group.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's really inspiring. If you think of high performance teams in a sports sense, I just think there's something wonderful about talking to a high performance team from a business perspective too, because I think, when they're firing on all cylinders, they're doing some pretty special stuff as well.
Yeah, I'll say this too. I love that you're saying high performing team, because I think there's a misconception that, you can achieve that. You might have moments you're a high performing team. You might have moments you're not. Again, you're a Leafs fan, Mike. I mean, I'm not trying to make fun of you, but it's a great point, right? They can't seem to pull it together when they have to. Now, by the way, I predict that they will this year. I just want you to know that I said that.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right.
I have never said that in my life. I've never predicted them, but I have a feeling that they're going to do something this year.
Did anybody get a timestamp on that?
I'm going to clip it. I'm going to clip it.
I already put it out. Yeah. It's 2023. We're at the start of the playoffs. I actually had you knocking off the Bruins this year, but that's the end of their run for me. Anyway, point being, there's a power in accountability when it comes to teams. And when you talk about high performing teams, to me, it's, again, highest levels of trust that are maintained. You're gonna notice a theme here when I talk that none of this stuff gets achieved. You have to nurture it. A highest level of accountability. When you can get into a group, and I'm gonna guess most people have experienced this at least once in their life, where most of the people are focused on helping each other and not just themselves. It's a pretty magical place to be. Mm-hmm. And when I talk to teams, again, this could be any team, I always talk about the prioritization of the team must come first, and then your teammates, and then yourself. And all three of those pillars are very valuable. You cannot operate without all three, but you can't do it in any other order. And I think a lot of teams have a mutilated version of that, whether it's either, most of the time I see a very selfish environment. I'm out for me. And again, nothing wrong with being out for yourself if you're in the right environment with it, right? Mm-hmm. So I try and create environments where people understand that we're working for each other, that there's a goal. I don't think a lot of organizations do a great job of explaining what their vision or their mission is. And like when I work in executive worlds, I'll ask, hey, what's the mission here? Just to a random employee. Most of the time, not every time, they can't tell you, right? Their mission's to get to 5 o'clock. And that's not good. That's not good. I mean, it's a noble mission for most of us, but that's not, as a leader, you don't want your employees saying, I just want to get out of here. Yeah. Right. I love that NASA story. You guys may know about the janitor at JFK. True story where JFK visited NASA, obviously in the early 60s. And he saw a janitor and he said, he introduced himself and he said, what are you doing here? And the janitor said, I'm working to put a man on the moon.
Yeah.
Right. He understood. He understood the assignment there. Yeah. Right. how many of you listening, how many of you watching feel that way about your team? Right. And as you can imagine, Stephen, in sports, right? My favorite one when I walk in the locker room, what's our goal? Well, we want to win, coach. That's great. Yeah. Every team I've ever worked with wanted that. Right. I've never walked into a locker room and had teams say, we want to come in 5th. Right. So even in that environment, why do you want to win? Who are you? What do other teams say about you when you leave the locker room? There's got to be something more than wanting to win. You have to be driven by the people around you and the purpose to win. There's got to be a higher calling for you to win that Game 7, to win that Stanley Cup. And if you look in hockey, you can look at any sport, right? At the teams that win, it's never just the championship that was driving them. There was something behind it, a meaning, a person, right? A city. I mean, there's so many ways to dive into identity, but these things are important and we're not doing them enough.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Mike had mentioned you wanted to talk about 2 of your businesses. The other one is Hockey Wraparound. We had Tom from Green Biscuit on the pod.
Oh, Tom Peterson,
yeah, not too long ago. Well, in fact, it was probably almost a year ago now.
Yeah.
God, time flies. And let me
time flies during a pandemic. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Let me paint a picture for you. A young Steve and a young Mike playing road hockey. We really could have used the Green Biscuit back then because, you're chasing tennis balls that are bouncing everywhere. But also in that sort of fall and then spring again, you're chewing the hell out of the heel of your stick. We could have used Hockey Wraparound. Could you talk about, that seems like something, well, no duh, why didn't someone invent this? But like, you did commercialize it. Can you talk about, where did that come from and how did Hockey Wraparound take shape?
Yeah, I mean, that story starts somewhere in the mid-90s, again, where I was starting to play. And one of the funny parts about me starting at 12 was that I had a lot of room I had to make up from a talent standpoint. I could always skate really well, but my shot, my stick handling, that side of the game didn't come so naturally in the beginning. So I had to work harder. I had to figure out a way. And again, from an innovation, I give them my father credit this. I knew I wanted a way to practice more with a puck and a stick. And so he took me to the little hardware store nearby. We got a piece of sheet metal, some WD-40. We put it on and it simulated ice, right? It's a really early shooting pad. There were no shooting pads or training aids back at that time. And so I was not an entrepreneurial mindset at that time. I just thought this is great. So I would take 500 shots a day, every day, and work on my craft, work on my game. Now fast forward some time, maybe 2013-ish, where I'm done playing, I'm coaching. And the idea kind of was presented of what if we put the steel around the blade, right? And made it portable. So the very first version of the Hockey Wraparound, you guys will love this, was a piece of steel that we kind of crafted that could fit around a hockey blade. And it was loud and it was clunky and it broke often, but it worked. The blade was protected. And we had the idea of, okay, let's put this in a packaging. Let's start selling it. I was actually living in England at the time this was happening, communicating back to the US. And sure enough, it started selling. Right now, I'm going to reiterate this, had about a 40% break rate, which is just not sustainable in any way. But we also at the time committed to really exceptional customer service. So if one broke, I always talk to the people in those early days of like, you're helping us learn, let's replace it. I always helped them out. And the steel one evolved. We got better. We understood that we had to bevel it a little bit. We understood we had to change the shape of it a little bit, and it got better and better and better, to the point that it really wasn't having too much of a break rate, but it was still kind of loud. It was still a little bit heavy. It did the job. And like most innovators, like most inventions, like we can do something better. Like we got to make it better. And this is when my business partner, Matt Eastman, walked into my life. He was also another military spouse in England. Both of our wives were serving in the Air Force. And I'll never forget, he said to me, I just got my entrepreneurial spirit and I just want to work on something. Wasn't even looking for anything. And he said, I think we could make this out of plastic. Right. And I remember, and this is funny because you'll find how this comes back on him. But I said to him right then, I said, we can't do that. You can't make this out of plastic. Couldn't be done. And he says, we can do it. So we got to work. And I remember the first prototype was a Herbal Essences shampoo bottle. You just wrapped it around. We still have it.
That transported me to a very specific place in my life, so that's why I left.
There you go. And smell, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
And when I had hair, it was beautiful. But the first prototype, which we still have, it still exists. And then we got down to work. We started talking to plastic experts and molding experts. And long story short, it took a year. And guys, I remember because the plastic in that is very formulated. It's not just a piece of plastic, right? It had to be flexible. It had to be hard wearing. It had to have some memory on the shape when you put it on the left or right-handed stick. It had to have some ability to grip the puck. So we spent a whole year making this thing before we got the first ones made. And we got ourselves a mold, and we put it on the market, and it really started selling well. Right. Mm-hmm. And then we went another year with this one. And I remember, and this is what one of the things I'm proud of. Well, two parts here. The thing back on Matt, we always tease each other. I said we could never make a plastic one. And when we did make it, he said famously to me, well, we'll never live on this. And I said to him, I don't agree with you. I think we could make something out of this. So a year after the first one came out, we were having pretty good success. Right. I should also mention that we didn't pay ourselves the first 3 years. Right. Like these are the sides of the entrepreneur stories nobody hears about. Like we put a lot of sweat equity in this and a lot of money into this over the first 3 years. And then after the first year of the first version of the plastic one, he and I made some pretty significant upgrades to it that if you just look at it, you might not see them, but parts of there's a wear indicator. We changed the texture of it to be better for a puck. The toe area that wraps around the toe of the stick, we made some advancements on that. And in a way, I don't want to ever say anything's perfected, but we got it to the best possible product it could be. Again, bought a new mold, and it started, follow me here, started really selling like crazy. Now we're at the point we are starting to take salaries and starting to live on this. And that brings us up to about probably 2017. And we were going to shows, and I remember the progression of the shows where the first year we went, it was no one had ever heard of us. Then it was, okay, I've heard of you. Or as we joke, it's a great idea. Well, see you later. Like we got a lot of that. Third year, people really started buying them. Fourth year, everybody wanted one. Fifth year, we started getting, I already have one. Right. So that was like the 5-year progression. I'm coming to the end of the story. I know I'm talking a lot. Then
not at all.
This just goes to show you when you come to entrepreneurship or a product, how important timing is. All right. Timing, which you don't have any control over, is insanely important because in 2020, every rink in the world shut down. All right. And I would believe me, no one was happy about this. It is the worst reason ever to become popular in terms of a business. But suddenly we had a solution for every hockey player on the planet, and they needed them immediately. Keeping in mind too, like most businesses, we were at the time, how are we going to keep our doors open? Right. Because if you remember, maybe people don't. So it seems like 6,000 years ago, but everybody was shut down. Nobody could work. Right. So we made a gut check decision. The day before they shut down everybody, I moved all of the inventory to my basement. And we started shipping these things from my home, which they couldn't touch. Right. And started shipping them all over the world. And we got very fortunate that our manufacturer at the time was also making hospital tiles. Right. So we could stay essentially in business without we did nothing illegal or anything like that. Right. Not that I was insinuating that. And from that event, which I'm going to reiterate, if I could go back in time and stop that from happening, I would do it without thinking. But from that event, our business grew and grew and grew and grew. And it kind of gets you to where we are today. But when I look back, again, Stephen, answer your question. This all spawned from curiosity of, I think there's a better way to do this. It spawned from really great teammates, right? Matt and I are yin and yang as business partners. It works out perfectly. We have Caitlin, who's our community manager and really our kind of our second in command, if you will. We're just surrounded by great people. And then the customer service side of it, which I think way too many people ignore. We never looked at people buying the product as just a consumer or a dollar sign. They're our fan base. And we treated them like that. And we've created a really large community based on that. And understanding that if something's wrong with this thing, we actually want to know. We're not going to ignore you like a hotel chain or an airline. Like, we actually want to know. And I think all of that together, when combined, has created the success of that product. I will say this to you too, because I think it's important for your audience, that, you know, we're patent pending right now, but, you know, I can't tell you when we started this, how many people said, well, I thought of that in 1978. And you know, here's the thing, nothing wrong with that. Like, and I always say to people two things. One is this: a lot of people have great ideas. All right. A lot of people, but great ideas are not worth much if you don't follow through.
Yeah.
All right. So we had a team that followed through, right? We saw the vision and we followed through. The other thing too is that you notice I've never said that I invented the idea of Hockey Wraparound, because if you look, there are patents going back really to the early 1900s, of something to protect the blade of a hockey stick. Now, our current version is patent pending for a reason. We invented a lot of technology that has gone into this now that it can probably become patented. All right. And will become patented. In addition to some of the other products that we have that are patented. But I'm saying this because I think a lot of people get discouraged at that point of, well, other people have thought of this and we'll never do it. And no, if you believe in it, you got to follow through with it. We believed in it. We saw the potential in it. We had some resources in terms of time, because again, our wives were serving in the Air Force. Matt and I had a lot of time to develop this, and I never take that for granted either. Right. Because that sweat equity is not possible if they're not serving. Right. And then the timing of COVID, again, I will keep saying it, which is horrible. We spent 5 years getting ready without knowing it for that moment. And when the moment hit, we were in a position to provide a lot of people, and this is the pride I take in it, with a solution to a big gap in their lives, right? Especially kids, right? Like we gave a wraparound away every day during the pandemic, during the lockdown. Not just as a marketing ploy. We really wanted kids that we couldn't give them all away, obviously, but just tell us how you're practicing. If you tell us right, we're going to give you one. You know, we gave a lot back. So again, that's the story arc. It continues to go. The team continues to grow, you know, so it's been a fun process.
Well, it's funny because, you know, that first year of the pandemic, I didn't get on to the rollerblading trend. We just had a new baby. So like, I think I had my hands full, or at least trying to help. So I didn't do the rollerblades that year, but the second year when the arenas were still shut down, I'm like, okay, well, I got to do something else. So like I bought rollerblades. It was the first time I had rollerblades since I was a kid. And then I encountered the two problems that we already identified. I don't know how I'm going to play hockey on the road. And then I found Green Biscuit. And then after I shredded my ice hockey stick,
you made a banana blade.
Yeah, basically, I tried to crowdsource something on Twitter. I'm like, what am I supposed to do with my blade? Like, I can't keep doing this every year. Like, it's not sustainable. And somebody said, well, you know, you can take you take a piece of a garden hose and you cut it down the middle and you can put that on the end of your blade and you can tape that up. I'm like, yeah, it's not really sure, that'll work, but it's not great. And then I found you guys, and then I bought that. And that's honestly how it kind of came about, was because, you know, people like me, but we're getting into roller hockey again for the first time because they kind of had to. And then just like the product works, it does exactly what it's supposed to do. So it is one of those things where, you know, you kind of come about it honestly. And it was, you know, I would have loved to have it when I was a kid, but happy I have it now, because it's allowed me to kind of prolong the life of my sticks as an adult who plays like non-serious hockey. Like, I shouldn't be going through a new twig every season. So I'm glad that I can kind of keep it rolling, because I don't have a big stick budget. So,
well, I'll tell you this too, and maybe your audience doesn't know, but top end hockey sticks cost $360 to $400. And they are expensive and they break. Right. And when I was growing up, sticks were $20, and that was expensive. Right. So the market shifted pretty heavily here. But Mike, to your point, you know, and I should have said this, like when we look at the value proposition or the pain points of wraparound, for kids, for athletes, it's you can use your game stick to practice, which is really, I always wanted to use the stick I was going to use in the game. I didn't want a crappy secondhand stick with a bad blade, because I didn't think I could be as precise, kind of going back to my childhood. Right. Basketball players carry a basketball around. Football players carry a football around. I wanted to use my stick. So that was the first pain point. The second pain point, as I just alluded to, and as the company evolved, we started realizing this, like all evolutions, that, parents love this because we're saving them an immense amount of money, potentially thousands of dollars a year, because their kids are taking a $300 stick outside to the street, and it will destroy it because it's not made for the street. So when we realized those two pain points, it was a great proposition for the audience. I don't want to sugarcoat, or I don't want to, gloss over that. We know our audience. You need to know your audience, right? Or else it is just a piece of plastic on your hockey stick. All right. So you're making a great point that you needed a solution, and the solution was there. I also want to say too, because there's a lot of kind of do-it-yourselfers out there, or people that like the garden hose thing you said. I always tell people I'm all for it. Look, you do what's best for you, right? We are a solution here, but if you want to use a garden hose, use it. Because the idea is, our goal is for you to have hockey be more accessible, however you want to do it. Now, I also believe if you use a garden hose, you're still going to come to us eventually.
Yeah, because it's not going to be the same.
Great.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, we've heard all the do-it-yourself ideas. In fact, one of my favorite campaigns we did one time wasn't really a campaign, but a kid overseas really kind of made an okay do-it-yourself version at home, in the sense of, it was a very low level kind of way he did it. It wasn't going to work long, but we were so impressed with his ingenuity. We sent him 5 of ours, just like, hey, love the way you're thinking, continue to be innovative. Here's 5 wraparounds, enjoy them. You know what I mean? Not to move them out of the way, but just like we wanted to encourage that type of thinking, because you never know where the next great idea is going to come from.
Well, yeah, and I mean, if you're thinking from the parent's perspective, I guess you'll need to come up with a sheet that goes over the garage door next if you want to talk about
that exists too, buddy.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does.
They have those nets already out there. You can put them down, and it saves you. I've broken many windows when I was a kid. My dad made me fix them, and that's how I started. I got real accurate when I had to start fixing the windows. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, Lee, shifting gears slightly. You were also very an avid. You're a podcaster, right? And I think what I wanted to sort of ask you about that is, there's no shortage of hockey or even sports related podcasts. And if you talk to you more than 5 minutes, you understand that you have a very sort of unique perspective on things. And I just wanted to know, how do you sort of differentiate yourself in a somewhat crowded podcast space? I mean, Mike and I know, that we're in a very crowded space, but what sort of strategies have you thought of to do that?
Yeah, what's funny about that is even just 5 years ago, I remember I was very anti starting a podcast. I remember thinking there's exactly what you just said. It's the market's way too saturated, and who's going to listen to that? I didn't want to get into it, even though I have a traditional broadcasting background. But I remember I had a kind of a caveat to that thought, which was, if I can find something unique or niche that no one's doing, then it might be worth pursuing. And it actually started really early on in COVID, where it was a totally different podcast, but this is where I first had my success with it. A buddy of mine are big sports fans, and we're big geeks. Love Star Wars, love Star Trek. All of it, comic books, and so we were having these hour-long conversations every day about all that stuff, and we decided during the pandemic to start a show called Geeks Who Like Sports, right? And it was unique, right? Because I figured if we're having these conversations, other people were, and we grew a pretty nice community, and it did really well. And I realized, okay, there's something here in this space. And then through my work in hockey, and this is how Our Kids Play Hockey, which just won Podcast of the Year for hockey at the Sports Podcasting Awards, which was amazing. Yeah. And I'm giving all that credit to my team too. Like, especially Caitlin, who I mentioned earlier, who's our community manager and producer. Certainly did not think that was a possibility even last year, but I'm not bragging. I'm telling you this for a reason, because the idea came up through some of the work I was doing in hockey of there's no show for hockey parents of youth hockey players. There's no community. In fact, if you kind of look up the community, it's this kind of real toxic, scary place, crazy parents. Yeah. Anybody who's scrolled social media, you've definitely seen a crazy hockey mom or dad. And in my experience, that's actually the minority. So myself, Mike Benelli, who's another hockey mind up in the Northeast, very well-established coach in person, and Christy Casciano-Burns, who's actually a news anchor in Syracuse, and also writes for USA Hockey Magazine. We teamed up and started the show Our Kids Play Hockey with just the idea of, it was during the pandemic, of let's just do something together during the pandemic to kind of keep the hockey juices flowing. And it exploded. I mean, there was a huge audience looking for this, clearly. And so the show kind of really quickly turned into really great advice, great tips, great interviews. Mike, yourself included in this, right? Where we were able to discuss the game from a youth hockey mindset of a parent and a coach, and discuss these issues weekly. Issues like, what do you say to your kid before they go on the ice? The car ride home is not for coaching. What is the difference between development and performance? And then we've had guests from USA Hockey, Hockey Canada, NHL mothers, NHL players. I mean, all over the world, and it's taken off. And that award I just talked about, and this is what I don't want to say I'm shocked by it. I'm really taken away by this, is to be shortlisted or nominated. It's industry experts that do that. So I was really honored that we got shortlisted. And there was some other pretty big name shows on the shortlist. And then the final vote's a fan vote. And I'm going, well, I don't know. Like, we're not as big as this show or that show. And so I kind of reserve myself to just not get my hopes up a little bit. And then Caitlin calls me, we won. Our fan base voted. They're the ones who got us this, right? So we clearly hit a nerve. So to answer your question, sorry, I'm rambling a bit. It's all about the community you create. We had a niche topic, a niche discussion. We really understand our audience, just like I said with our business. And then we created a community around that through, we have a group on Facebook. Obviously, we have our website. We ask them to share it. We ask them to give us ideas for episodes. It's very much a two-way conversation. And even though the three of us on the show are the, quote unquote experts, right? It's a communal experience for our audience. And guys, I hear from our audience all the time. We get emails and messages weekly, albeit, hey, I've got a question I want you to discuss, or, hey, really appreciated this episode because this applies to me and my kid and where we're at right now. So I think that is also a huge key to the success, not just the production value of it, but the fact that we've created this community of really engaged people that find value and share it, and it grows and grows and grows, and it continues to grow every week. And I'm blown away by it. I was not something I thought was going to turn into what it turned into.
Yeah, it's funny because I think actually our podcast origin story is not that dissimilar. Steve and I, for years, I think, had talked about, like, we should do a podcast. Like, we talk and we think we're funny, and presumably maybe there has to be at least somebody else out there who thinks we're funny, and we'd have these ideas of, like, this could be a podcast or that could be a podcast, and then finally we're like, well, we should just do a work podcast, because there is a space in the market. There's not a lot of applied research podcasts that are out there hosted by two guys that work in research administration. And then it just kind of went from there, and obviously it's worked. We've been doing this now for a couple of years, but it kind of started off with what are we going to do? And then we just kind of arrived at the idea, and, it's just kept going.
Yeah. I'll tell you guys this too. And I'm sure this is true for you as well. I didn't start any of them with this, we'll get sponsored and get money and get these million listeners. Never was that the intention. The intention was always, I just want to have great conversations with my friends. And if other people choose to listen, that's great. And look, there's a half-life on these things. You can't do them forever if you have other things to do. But when we saw the audience growing, and we understood we had a responsibility at that point too, we continue to do it. And we do it every week, 52 times a year, if not more. But again, come back to your point, the reason for getting into it was pure. It was, we're having great conversations. Let's just have them on the air and see if there's an audience.
Well, you've been so generous with your time today, Lee. Before we let you go, like, we did want to kind of ask you, because you've given us a great snapshot about what you're currently up to, but what's on the horizon that you can share? Is there anything that you can talk about now, either when it comes to Game 7 group or Hockey Wraparound? What's coming in the future that's exciting?
Yeah, it's a great question. With Wraparound, we're always looking to grow and innovate. We introduced a new product recently called the Dry Stick, which Matt really invented. We worked on it together, but it's a portable drying system that actually attaches to your hockey stick, right? So kind of staying in that market where there's a lot of tournaments where roller hockey players are typically outside afterwards, where you can attach these things to your stick and you can dry your equipment. So we're always looking for new innovative ways to expand our product line and to grow our footprint. We don't think we've actually saturated the market yet. We think there's actually a lot of the markets, believe it or not, even with COVID, that doesn't know who we are. Right. So the expansion of that company, I take a lot of pride in being a job creator, and expanding our team is on the horizon. With Game 7 group, I am really focused on Game 7 group right now with multiple fronts. I've been getting asked more than ever to speak to business and sports teams on team building, and how to operate cohesively as a group. So I'm looking to expand that marketplace quite a bit and really provide the ability for not just me to speak to teams and consult teams, but to teach these teams how to fish and do it themselves. My really grand mission, Mike, is I really want the world to believe in teamwork again. When I think about it, and you can't just do that if you're not teaching people how to fish, right? So I have some things I'm working on in the background that I can't go into right now that are going to enable people to learn and be educated with assistance, and to continue to nurture team bonds, whether it be in sport, whether it be in business, with a real focus, believe it or not, on youth. Because my mindset is that while I love working with professional teams, sports or business, and the people that want to learn will always learn. If you really want to change the world, it's not going to come from us. It's going to come from the kids. And I don't think kids are too young to understand how to be mindful. I don't think they're too young to understand how to be a good teammate and how to understand empathy is a popular word right now. Leadership, teamwork, trust, accountability. I think it's a misconception that we think an 8-year-old can't understand those things. I'm going to tell you this right now. I've worked with a lot of 7, 8, and 9-year-olds on this. I've done my research. They're better at it than the adults. Mm-hmm. Right. So if we really want to change the world, I think they're the ones who are going to change it. We just have to give them the tools. And that's the mission I'm on now.
Yeah. Well, I can't think of a better way to sum things up than that. What I did want to say before we let you go, Mike's a bigger hockey fan than I am. I'm a huge football fan. I played football for a long time.
I love football too.
I can't help but notice the Brian Westbrook jersey behind you. So I just wanted to shout that out. So
yes, well, I'm a big Philadelphia Eagles fan, born and raised in the city. So I'm sure the dismay of many of your listeners, but I'll tell you what, when you take the fandom out of it, the crazy Philadelphia fans, as a sports franchise, the Eagles have been a joy to be a fan of, and they really do a great job running that team. And I'll tell you what, that 2018 Super Bowl from the 17-18 year was amazing.
Yeah, you're kind of born at the right time, you know, like they almost made it last year and then 2018. So anyway, Lee Elias, thank you so much for joining Mike and I on the Unlikely Innovators, and we look forward to more cool and innovative things coming from you and your company. So thanks for joining us.
No, thanks for having me, guys. I love your show. I love what you're doing. I want you guys to keep innovating as well. Keep it up.
Cool.
Thanks so much, Lee. Really appreciate it.
So, Mike, that was a great chat with Lee Elias, of course.
Not Lee Elias, which would have been
not Lee Elias, which would have been a perfect name. I think he could just do it. He could just say Elias.
But he's saying as a Philadelphia guy, you know, Patrick Elias was not really popular with the Flyers fans in the in the mid 90s to early 2000s. So
yeah. Hey, you know what I was gonna say? I'm starting to pick up on. We're in 90 some episodes now. There are a few, I guess, what would you call them? Sayings that we've come up with that I feel we repeat in a lot of podcasts, and I just wanted to go over some with you.
Yeah. Let's.
I think every podcast we've said shifted gears.
100%.
I think we've said, I really wanted to ask you, or I've been wanting to ask you,
as if we didn't know that we were going to ask that.
I know. And then the third one that I've noticed, and then I'll see if you've thought of any, is when we're ending the podcast, we always say you've been very generous with your time, which is true. But I just think it's funny that we have these comfort, because there's something in podcasting where you get a bit stressed out if you can't remember what you're going to say, off the cuff. So luckily, we have these sort of cheat codes that we use to sort of get into the next thing we're going to say. But I just thought that was funny that I noticed that today.
Yeah, no, I think we both say, you've been so generous with your time all the time. And they are generous with their time. So it's genuine. We're not just saying this to fill space, but those are definitely ones that we lean on for sure. And another one that I, do is like you set me up so well for this next question. Right? And oftentimes they do. And you say that because it makes sense, but it's
because we're so good at coming up with questions, I think.
You know what? I think you wouldn't be 90 something episodes into your podcast journey if you were bad at asking questions, right? Especially on a podcast that relies on bringing guests on and asking them questions.
Yeah. There would be a pretty boring conversation if no one was asking questions.
Yeah. No kidding. But
well, anyway, go ahead.
No.
I was going to end the podcast. So if you had something else, it's your last chance.
Oh, no. I was going to end the podcast as well.
Okay. Well,
is there a sign off that we typically do?
I usually say we'll see you next time.
There was something that we used to do back, and this is the listeners.
Oh, yeah.
But there was something we used to do in the early. I forget what it was now.
Yeah, I think
this
it was
is
like
awful bringing this up. And
I think it was something like, well, that's it. Is that it?
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. Well, that is it. So thanks again for tuning into the Unlikely Innovators. Thanks to Lee Elias for joining us. We will be back with some new content next week. And, right around the time that this episode drops, it is getting nice out. Hopefully the street supers have been by. I know that I'm going to get my rollerblades out, and I will definitely have the Hockey Wraparound on. So we'll see you next time.
The Unlikely Innovators with Mike Commito and Steve Gravel. Presented by Cambrian R&D and the Center for Smart Mining.